It's been a tough couple of years for all of us, and perhaps even harder on our relationships. In her new book, Love in the Time of Contagion, cultural critic and analyst Laura Kipnis examines the way the pandemic has changed the way we connect and how we view love. What made you realize you needed to look into this issue and write this book?
Well, I had written a previous book called Against Love. So that suggests, I guess, that I'm both fascinated and also pretty ambivalent about the subject. And that book was an extended rant against domestic confinement or domestic coupledom. And so then when lockdown started in New York, I had been in and still am in this long-term relationship, but of the living apart together mode. So, of course, we had to shelter together in this one-bedroom Manhattan apartment, meaning there's barely time or place or space to get away from the other person for 30 seconds or think whatever you want to think. So it did make me, under these forced, domestic coupledom conditions, think a lot about love and think about intimacy and reflect on, what was going on around the world as everyone was confronted with this contagion. And also thinking about previous pandemics or epidemics like AIDS, HIV, and kind of wondering what the effect of this was going to be in the long term on our sense of connection with other people. That viruses are contagious in this physical, literal sense, but there's also, I think they change our sense of other people and the risks and threats they pose. So I was kind of wondering in my own life, how was that affecting my relation to my boyfriend and, what was happening with other people?
Gosh, I'm so glad you asked those questions, because in reading these things and some of the survey you did, I felt a lot less alone. And you specifically mentioned millennials. What have you found about millennials seeking intimacy during lockdown?
One of the things that happened was Zoom, so you got to have these conversations with people in a kind of intimate way, as we are now, that you wouldn't ordinarily have had. So one of the people I was having ongoing conversations with was this former student of mine who is queer, Black, millennial, none of which I am, but, we seem to connect on other levels. It's somebody I've stayed in touch with since she graduated, maybe 7 or so years ago. So we started having these conversations every week or two about her love life under lockdown, which I was fascinated by, because in her circle of friends, so much of and they were not that impeded by lockdown. So people would meet online, and there still is a lot of hooking up. What was happening with her, so much of her relationships were playing out online, in all available forms of digital connection. It was like a village. Everybody was judging everyone's relationships and commenting on them. And there was just no end of chaos and drama that they both, I think, thrived on or vulnerable to. It just was a very different way of living than intimacies.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to think of it. Where do you think we go from here after this? I mean, the pandemic has changed the world in so many ways. What does it change for love?
I think the dust is still settling. I was reading reports right at the beginning about how many breakups there were. And when things first opened up, divorce lawyers were fielding all of these calls from people. Then you started hearing, no, there was a reverse trend and people were staying together. So, between the economic hits, all the people that got COVID and suffered, long COVID and suffered losses, I just do think the dust is still settling. So I've noticed when things open up in the cities I've been in, like last summer, there just was this kind of party atmosphere, but there was something a little frantic about it. I think people were desperate to live and get out while they had the chance to. This is going to be with us for a long time. What's also with this is the political fractures that this has put into motion. So, I think there is this increasing sense or ongoing sense of other people as more and more harmful to us, interpersonally, politically. I think we're living through these really cataclysmic, history-altering times. And so I think I was kind of trying to talk about what's the texture of that? What does that feel like in the moment?
It'll definitely be interesting to see the state of love years from now.